And enough of windows. Praise doors. Step out with arms open and eyes gathering vim and vision. Grandeur trailing from worm and woodchuck. Branch puzzles of woods. Open boat of breeze. All brimming with hey and hallelujah and celebrate. Such green giving of thanks. Such miraculous mercy of earth. Calm valley, and even this rugged, rocky chain we climb now as family, claiming praise as respite, holding close each breaking day, dangerous yet divine in all its gorgeous glory.
That's the voice of 2023 Monson Arts Fellow and radio host of WPSU-FM's Poetry Moment, Marjorie Maddox. Marjorie has published 17 collections of poetry in her lifetime. She was co-editor with Jerry Wemple of the anthology Commonwealth, Contemporary Poets on Pennsylvania, published by Penn State University Press in 2005, as well as its 20th anniversary project, Keystone, Contemporary Poets on Pennsylvania, also by Penn State University Press, just this past year in 2025. Welcome to In Three Poems, the podcast where we read 3 poems with a different guest poet each week. And the third poem is always a work by another poet chosen by our guest. I have with us today dear friend Marjorie Maddox, who has had a very busy year. Welcome to the podcast, Marjorie, first of all.
Thanks so much for having me.
So you have 4 books and an anthology that have all kind of come out in the same year. It's one of those things you don't plan, right?
Yes, a little bit crazy. A good thing, but I wouldn't recommend it all happening at once.
Yeah, I can only imagine that. You've had the Keystone Poetry Anthology that you co-edited with Jerry Wemple, who was a guest earlier in the season. And you've been having readings not only in Pennsylvania, though. I participated in the one at Lit Youngstown.
Right.
Which
right.
was,
We're up to 20 readings now.
That's
so we've
amazing.
been going like gangbusters around the state.
It was kind of fun to tell people, yeah, I'm going with a group of poets from Pennsylvania to Ohio to read poems about Pennsylvania. But also 4 of your own books. Now you've got Hover Here and tell me the other ones.
Earthly Space, which was a collaboration with photographer Karen Elias.
Yes.
Seeing Things.
And A Man Called Branch.
Yes, A Man Called Branch, which is prose.
Okay. And that's part of your love for baseball is where that comes from.
Yes, that's about my great-grand-uncle, Branch Rickey, who helped break the color barrier by signing Jackie Robinson.
That's
so
awesome.
It's a very chatty, kind of poetic narrative biography. Lots of fun to read.
That does sound fun. I know you've been working on that and looking forward to that for some time.
Yes.
So.
Yes, that one I wrote like 20 years ago. So that's this whole timing issue. Who knows when things are going to actually come out.
So we put our heads together and chose 3 poems to focus our talk around. And one of the cool things about this is I get to read the first one. And so the first one that we have is actually from your book I mentioned, Hover Here. And it's a short one, but I want to kind of talk about a couple of the poems around it as well. It is called How We Are Found. Not slip sliding away, that same drop of me, you, us, in breeze or creek, cumulus or reef, whiplashing what's left of then into now, and not that mindfulness moment invented by blade and slug on a day not unlike tomorrow's, in the middle of nothing, but the same me, you, us on display, but rather something indescribably and irretrievably in between. And it's
wonderful reading.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. It's fun to do because it's a little enigmatic, and it's fun to look at line endings and the structure. There's a little bit of visualness going on where some of the lines where they're indented, and trying to imagine how the author imagines that informing a reading. In that way, I will compare this to something like The Snowman by
Wallace Stevens?
Wallace Stevens, The Snowman, where in that poem there was no punctuation whatsoever, and you have to figure out just where the right place is to pause, and it can
Yeah,
kind
this
of make a
this
big
one has
difference.
a little bit different style for me. It's really I kind of wrote the 2 together, the one that comes right before it, "When We
Okay.
Are Lost, How We Are
Yes.
Found." Um, and I think, if I remember correctly, it's because a journal was asking for submissions on the theme of "When we are lost, how we are found."
Well, that's great.
So sometimes when I get stuck, I will look at, what journals are asking for. Do they have particular theme? And then I kind of just riff off of that. So these are kind of more riffing and wordplay than some of the other pieces. It has to do with, trying to find your place in the world.
Yeah.
And it's not always exactly here or there. It's sometimes in between, where
Yes.
you're looking.
And that seems to happen a lot in this book, and also in sort of a unifying way, because there's another poem I think it's actually stretches into. That's like right near the end of part 2, and then you get into part 3, and there is, yeah, a few poems in, a poem called The Sound of Gulls. And I had a really hard time, me being a bird lover, by the way, choosing one of your recent poems to read, because there's so many options. There were a beautiful poem about the loon. There were poems about curlews, which I'll ask you about when we get to talking about a poem from that book, but also these about the gulls and even feathered clouds, where you have that sort of
I'll
imagery
tell
and
you my
wings.
inspiration. I had a wonderful, wonderful writing residency in Monson Arts in Maine, and so I drafted most of this book while I was there. I set myself a goal of 3 poems a day, and, 3 drafts a day, and I wanted to get to, like, 50, and, a bunch of those I had to throw out, but, it really made me keep going, and I sat out on this balcony that they had and looked out at the water, and so there's a lot of poems with the influence of not Pennsylvania, but of Maine,
Right.
those particular poems,
Is
yeah.
that where some of the hiking poems came from as well?
Yes, yes,
Yes. Yeah, I
yes,
could definitely identify with I think it's hiking while old.
yeah. Yes, I had these, wonderful artists and, a writer who were much younger than I am, and, we did some hiking together, and boy, they were much faster than I was, and they were very kind, pretending to, pause and tie their shoe, but they were really waiting for me to catch up. Oh,
Oh god,
yeah.
I was talking to some of the students that I work with, and I said, there was a time when I did not worry about how I was gonna get across just skip from stone to stone across the stream and
Mhm.
jump up to the other bank, and now I find myself I have to stop and think, "Okay, can my knee handle that amount of weight
Yes,
landing at that speed after this jump on that rock, or am I gonna end up in the middle of the stream?"
I was there, yes, yeah. A lot I think about pausing and slowing down, and I liked what the editor of Broadstone Books said about it, that it's also, though, about a sense of urgency, and I think you see that in those 3 sections because there's social commentary and commentary on the environment and, things that we can't wait around for
Right.
at the
That's what I
same
was gonna
slowing down.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about the sections. You have a love for I know it'll come out as we talk about the different books too. You have a love for really having a theme in a book, but also having a, a real playful relationship with structure in the poems themselves. And I think it's this one where, yeah, it's this book where you have a great deal. You have a lot of sonnets. You have, I think, the other book we were talking about, Seeing Things, is that the one where there are a lot of odes? Not just in that
Yes,
book, though.
yes.
Yeah, but you also have some shaped poems and what appeared to be free verse with almost line forms that you kind of made up as you went that fit that individual poem. And I love that sense of playfulness that you have with it and how that comes across on the page, as well as in reading it, adding this extra dimension. And is that kind of on purpose, or is that something you're just drawn to?
Using the form is on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes it just happens and sometimes it feels like it just fits the form better, especially I think when you're dealing with difficult subject matter, sometimes it's easier to put it into a fixed form. Sometimes it just evolves like the poem, Beyond This Poem in Hover Here is calling for, don't hide behind this poem, get out and do something about the environment. but I end each line with the word care and a
Hmm.
different form of the word care. And that just kind of happened. Like I started the first couple lines and then I thought, oh, this is kind of a pattern. It's not a sestina, but it's, the same word.
Yeah, I thought of that as I was looking, and I thought, oh, this is sort of Sestina-like as I was reading it, the repetition of certain words.
I guess with the curlew bird too in Small Earthly Space, I was working with photographer Karen Elias, so I had these wonderful prompts. I mean, sometimes the poem came first, sometimes the photograph came first, but that worked as a wonderful prompt for me to get writing. But we also Karen found these fantastic, intriguing quotations about the curlew bird, and we kind of went from there. And then we had from Allie Smith's companion piece. And then all of a sudden I started writing more and more curlew bird poems. And then the bird became kind of a guide through the book. So we didn't really set out thinking that was going to happen, but that's what evolved.
And I hadn't thought of that until now, but in a way, that's a little bit like using a form. I know some of the theme has come up multiple times throughout this season of how a form can be a container for emotions or
Right.
things that you don't know how to say any other way, but then you have this structure to put it into.
And I think typically I've written books that I didn't necessarily think I had a theme. It was interesting that you said that, but like that particular book, Small Earthly Space, I was very cognizant that it was going to be a book. That these curlew birds were going to kind of come together. There's a lot of poppies in it. There's a lot of playing off of poems that have already been written, as opposed to other times I will just have lots of poems and then I gather them together and try to make sense of what kind of order they go in.
Well, I'm thinking, and if you get the chance, you should look at I'm talking to our listeners now, you should look at Marjorie's repertoire of books, because you had a great one that was thematically poems about teachers or from a teacher's point of view and working with students. You also had a book going way back, local news from someplace else, and is it Weekends at the Cathedral?
Yeah,
Where with a great many spiritual poems and very playful poems too. I know, picturing the Christ as a figure in the circus on the high wire kind of thing, I
yeah,
remember. And
yes, I had a
that's
long series of poems. How to fit God into a poem, and
yeah. Yeah. So you seem to, whether you intend to or not, you seem to gravitate toward that. It's kind of the fun of reading it and thinking, oh, what is Marjorie writing about now? But the curlew shows up in Small Earthly Spaces. There's a lot of religious and mythologically religious symbolism on the curlew as well. I'm not as familiar with, or wasn't as familiar with. I always learn something new when I'm reading your stuff too. That's part of
well,
the
I
fun of
always
those
learn
things.
something too when I'm writing it because I
Perfect.
didn't really know very much about curlews at all, or about
Okay.
there's a long poem on hollyhocks, and there are
Oh
a lot
yeah.
of fables and myths that go along with hollyhocks. So one of the great things with having kind of a series is, you always have something else you can keep writing about because you keep doing a little more research and you think, oh, well, that's another thing I could add in here. And so, the series keeps expanding. So that's been a lot of fun too. But yeah, you kind of find out all the other meanings that have previously been associated with these things.
So you chose a poem from Seeing Things
Yes.
called Ode to Everything.
Yes. So maybe I'll say just a little bit about this book. It's probably the hardest book I've ever written.
Really?
And it's really about 3 generations of women. So, daughter of a mother entering the early stages of dementia, mother of a daughter struggling with depression, and then woman kind of struggling with her own issues of survival in a world where truth and lie are very murky.
Mm.
So, I wrote most of this at Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, and, it's pretty depressing material.
Yeah.
So in order to kind of keep my sanity, I started writing a series of odes.
Okay.
So I have maybe 10 or 12 odes throughout the book to give the reader a break, also to give me a break and give some perspective. So this is the very last poem in the book, and it's called Ode to Everything. Enough of the lamentations. Open the window and sing. The world is awash with world, color-dripping globe always tilting into some or another. Clouds stretching wide, plump happiness, even in the noisy stage show of showers, such sunny ovations. And the birds, overpopulating every poem, swoop here for free. Swallow, hawk, robin, gull, eagle. What else can be written but wings that wave horizon to horizon? And enough of windows. Praise doors. Step out with arms open and eyes gathering vim and vision. Grandeur trailing from worm and woodchuck. Branch puzzles of woods. Open boat of breeze. All brimming with hey and hallelujah and celebrate. Such green giving of thanks. Such miraculous mercy of earth. Calm valley, and even this rugged, rocky chain we climb now as family, claiming praise as respite, holding close each breaking day, dangerous yet divine in all its gorgeous glory.
I love that. All brimming with hey and hallelujah. Such a great line. And this is an ode and an ode to everything, but there's references to other poems we may be familiar with, even if they're just kind of vague references. Kind of like in the poem that I read in How We Are Found, it's talking about that mindfulness moment. And I think we're referring in some ways, or at least to the spirit of the kind of poem written by a poet that we all know and love, who may teach us a lesson about lying in the grass and looking at a bug, in this case, a slug. And I love that you're playful with that, I think, while honoring it at the same time, which that's tricky to do, to play on what someone else has done and say, enough of this sort of thing, not that mindfulness moment. And yet you're honoring it and having a mindfulness moment while you're saying that, but looking at it in new ways, and not just looking out the windows, but looking at doors. Let's keep looking at noticing new things, which is taking the lessons of those poets, I think, and putting them to use, not just
Persevering,
right.
keep going. Don't. You can easily drown in some of this stuff, right? Because
Right.
life is very hard. Obviously, we all know that, and I don't think that we just skim over that. We also, just, kind of keep going. And I think that poem is kind of an encouragement to self and maybe encouragement to all, that despite everything, there's all this grandeur going on too.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it works on, I think, the level of the living experience as well as the encouragement to the artist. Yeah.
Yeah, and most of my poems have that kind of connection between the natural and the spiritual worlds. And so I think, we're going back and forth between those, or we're always in the
Yeah.
middle of those.
When I was talking about that me, you, us kind of thing, there was a poem that we had read by Liesl Mueller when I had an episode with my friend Joel recently. What was the poem? Monet Refuses the Operation, where you see that the divisions between things aren't necessarily there, let alone aren't necessarily needed,
Yeah.
and liking to see the connection. If you take away the ivy over the bridge, instead of seeing the bridge and the ivory all as one thing. Yeah. And I feel that as I'm reading through some of these works.
Yeah, and that definitely comes out with all the curlew poems too, that idea of unzipping the sky. The curlew walks on that tightrope between eternity, between the natural and the spiritual worlds.
Did you think at all of the tide rises, the tide falls?
No, I didn't, but I like that.
And then the next line, what is it? The something in the curlew calls. I can't remember the exact. I used to know that one by heart. The tide rises, the tide falls. Oh, listeners, if you know it, quote it. And then it's about the curlew call.
Please help us out.
Yeah, feel free to click on that link at the bottom that says text the show. Tell me the line. I could Google it and edit that in between, but it's more fun getting your feedback. But yeah, that's part of something that intrigues me about this whole project, where we're looking at poems by a particular poet and each getting a chance to read one, but then also looking at a poem by someone else that inspires you, whether it's from a poet long dead or a poet who is a colleague, as in the case here with you today, but we're all kind of living in that same spiritual, physical world of art and literature as well. And none of it happens, as I've said before, in a vacuum. So it's interesting to see the
How they
interrelations.
resonate with each other is wonderful.
Yeah. And so you were drawn to a poem by Laura Reece Hogan to share with us.
Yes, and I love Laura's work, and this is the title poem for her from her book Litany of Flights, which also won the Paraclete Poetry Prize a few years ago. And there's so many things that I really like about it. One of the things I really like is that it kind of mirrors the process that poets go through, I think, because you're always looking at different angles at an object or even a word, the different definitions, all the nuances of what a word can mean. And again, with this poem, you have that combination of the intertwining of suffering and joy, I think, too.
Yeah.
And of course, for I was thinking of you too with birds. So you have lots of birds
Yes, I
in this.
was delighted that you had me at Scrub Jay in the first
Yeah,
line.
but other kinds of flights too, the flights that we
Yeah.
take it as humans and airplanes and Icarus and everything else. So, litany of flights. First, the winged moment, steady, forward. Scrub jays in flitting progress, hawks in predator glide. A ringing up, a knife-sharp slope down. Second, the effortless type, wind-splayed, motionless pinions and thermal recline. As the psalmist says, blessings breeze his love even in sleep. Third, the hungry, against the gale, the destination singular and the sun dipping crimson. Fourth, the metallic, business or pleasure. Fifth, the whirring kind, all hummingbird. A picnic, apples and chocolate in the garden with roses, both flower and child. You miss it when it's gone. Sixth, a baffling flight of stairs, winding upward, passage and yet vehicle, spiraling to unseen landings. Hope courses in the kaleidoscopic lights. Seventh, soar to the sun. Eighth, melt in bitter hubris. You know the story. Ninth, escape. A flight out of Egypt, a path through the sea cleared by divine hand. The times you ran, the times you are left behind in lament. 10th, only rotting in the belly of a whale tames your stubborn turn from Nineveh. 11th, flights of despair and of yearning, two sides of one letting go, hard-earned release back into the wild, unbound by expectation. Feather-like. 12th, in a moment, caught up high by the beloved, the one making all things work together, wings, body, arch, air, caught up like the Shulamite bride to regions beyond aeronautical wisdom, transported in joy. See, he says, the painful paring of your hollow bones has made you light. I love that ending. And it's kind of painful though too, because nobody, of course, wants to suffer. But then you have this sense of even out of that can come some kind of flight, and the positive and the negative connotations of flight, all these different kinds of flight. There's just so many variations.
Yeah, you never think about, with the biblical imagery, you never think about Jonah and the whale. His flight from Nineveh was actually the opposite of what you would think of as a bird's flight, as he's
Right.
underwater in the fish's belly, or
Yeah.
in the whale.
The flight's away, but the flight towards the flight's up.
And the flight of stairs. Talk
Yes.
about wordplay. You had mentioned in the one collection being a lot of wordplay. And I love this, that there's wordplay, but it's also, as you said, very heavy stuff.
And there's always transformation. I think that's one of the things that really makes a poem work is you are in a different place at the end of the poem than you were at the beginning.
Yeah. That's one place where I don't have to even say what drew you to this poem. I can see a lot of your own kind of inspirations in here, not just with the wordplay, but with that connection of the spiritual and physical.
Yes. Yeah, I think we deal with a lot of the similar kind of themes or issues and love of language, yes.
We thank Laura for allowing us to use her poem. So you had mentioned that now you are kind of taking a project break. I know you're not necessarily good at sitting still, so what does
No,
that break
well, I guess I'm
consist
taking
of?
a little bit of a break from putting together another collection. I have a
Gotcha.
bunch of poems and I'm still writing, but with all these books going on at the same time, it's been crazy. Like March, I think I have 10 events going on. So it's just been a lot of kind of back and forth. But it's also been invigorating, and
I'm
has
sure.
connected me to all kinds of communities, and that's been very uplifting and exciting. So I will get back to putting that book together. I have some ideas, but I'm just not in a place of wanting to sit down and put them together right at this point because I think I just need a break from the marketing part.
Another poet. Well, I think we go
Of
in
course, it might
stages
take 10
sometimes.
years to get the next one, so, then I'll have too much of a break.
Well, I think it's really rare that I've been in a stage between like where I'm both getting things published and heavily writing.
Well, it's a different kinda energy, right? I
Yeah.
mean, and you have experienced the same kind of thing. You put on the marketing hat or you put on
Yeah.
the submission hat and the business hat, which I don't I prefer the writing hat.
Right.
Uh,
But
but,
sometimes
it takes a while.
when I can't get myself into one of the writing headspace, I try to make myself do one of the others.
Right. And then you
So
still feel like you're being productive and
exactly.
sometimes
Exactly.
it's the procrastination. Sometimes when I can't write, then I'll do the other stuff, and sometimes when I don't feel like, doing the marketing or doing the submission stuff, then I actually procrastinate by writing a poem, which is really strange.
Well, at least you get a balance that way. So what thoughts do you want to leave our listeners on other than, buy some of these books? And I will put links in the show notes so people can do that as well. So they can take a look at the beautiful works you've been putting
I
out.
guess maybe a plug too, just for the Keystone Poetry Anthology and all the fantastic poets, yourself and Micah included, in the state. I know
Yeah.
this goes out all across the country, but, think about the Pennsylvania poets too.
And poems of place, no matter where they're from, I'm intrigued by,
Yes,
especially when the poet can make you feel like
so
you're in
much
Arizona, maybe
like
when
it.
you've never been there. Yeah.
It
Yes.
it just is part of who we are.
Well, thank you for being here and thanks for sharing some poems.
Magic, this has been fun.
It certainly has been. Good luck with the rest of your activities in March. And as you had said, keep going.
Yeah, thank you so much, David.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Marjorie.
Bye-bye.
Our 3 poems this week were How We Are Found by Marjorie Maddox from one of her recent collections, Hover Here. That was read by me, and Ode to Everything from Seeing Things, also a recent collection by Marjorie, read by Marjorie Maddox herself. Our third poem read by Marjorie was called Litany of Flights by Laura Reece Hogan, and thank you to Laura for permission to use the poem on the show. For updates about upcoming episodes, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or Blue Sky, and next week we'll be talking with Sadiq Zukhogi. If you are enjoying the podcast, you could make a difference by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or giving us a rating on Spotify. Thank you so much for doing that. I'm David J. Bauman. Thanks for joining us again for a conversation in 3 poems.